with the Metalog distributions, you get a choice of boundedness. This is really important. You've got a lot of variables in life. The basic Metalog distribution that I've shown you with this equation here, this is the CDF expressed in terms of a quantile function. This basic equation gives you an unbounded distribution. It's very much like the normal or the logistic or lots of others. There are infinite tails on both ends. Student T is that way. And that's perfectly fine for applications such as error measurements that could be infinitely large, positive or negative, and so forth. But there are a lot of applications where what you really want is a bounded distribution, like a cost, for example. Costs can't be negative. They're going to be greater than 0. Or a repair time, or a number of aircraft in a fleet, or a number of cyber attacks on your website in the next hour, or whatever it may be. All of those things have a lower bound of 0, and you don't want to have to use a distribution that well, you know, people say, okay, well, I've got an unbounded distribution, so I'll arbitrarily chop off the tails at 0. Well, that's a really arbitrary approach. Wouldn't you rather have something that has a nice smooth shape and that has a natural lower bound? Well, you can do this exactly what you do in getting, as you do when you create a log normal distribution from a normal distribution. And I think, as many of you would know, if the log of a variable x is normally distributed, then x itself is log normally distributed. You can do exactly the same thing with the Metalog distribution. If the log of x is Metalog distributed, the x itself is log Metalog distributed, and that log Metalog distributed has a lower bound. You can set this lower bound BL at 0 or at any other value you would like, and you'll end up with a nice smooth distribution with a lower bound of 0, and then it'll go up and it'll eventually go down and have a short tail or long tail depending on your data. Notice that this distribution is a function only of the lower bound and this MN. This MN is just the basic Metalog quantile function, okay? So you haven't invented anything new, you've just done a transformation. And this, believe it or not, is wonderful. It has the wonderful characteristic that it's just as easy to fit to data. You use least squares or ordinary least squares to fit it to data, and so it has all these infinite flexibility or unlimited flexibility characteristics of the Metalog distribution, but it is a semi-bounded form. You can do the same thing if it's bounded on the high end. I'm not going to show that here. You can also have a bounded Metalog distribution, and that is if the logit of x that has a lower bound, a given lower bound and a given upper bound, whatever you want, if the logit of x is Metalog distributed, then the logit Metalog distribution has an upper bound and a lower bound. So this is very much like a beta distribution. And in fact, the logit Metalog can arbitrarily closely approximate any beta distribution with any settings for alpha and beta, its parameters you want, but it's far more flexible in the beta distribution and can be used for many more things. But anyway, you have this choice. Whenever you're using Metalogs, you can say, do I want it to be bounded, semi-bounded? You know, obviously if it's a market share or a percentage of a population or a percentage of planes going in for service or whatever it may be, you need a distribution that's bounded between 0 and 1. Well, then you'd pick the logit, you'd pick the bounded one. If you've got, anyway, it's up to you to choose whatever you want. This is something you cannot do with the Pearson distributions, by the way.